Burkina Faso is pleased to participate in this panel to be able to share our experience regarding the integrated national financing frameworks. We began this in 2019 with the support of the UN Development Programme. And this is a process that we began on the basis of a diagnosis of our development financing, which was approved in 2022 and which allowed us to put in place a strategic steering committee that would then work on the elaboration of a national integrated financing framework, an INFF. We need to recall that the context in Burkina Faso is a fairly unique one because of the humanitarian and financial difficulties the country has been facing for a long time. But fortunately, current activities are making it possible now to recover a large part of the territory and to allow internally displaced persons to go back to their homes. But that, of course, does not come without enormous, vast efforts in the area of financing, covering reintegration of these people, but also development efforts, quite simply, to allow these people to return home and to make sure that no one is left behind in these conditions where, despite our difficulties, we are aiming to pursue our development goals. And it's in that context that Burkina Faso has implemented the Action Plan for Stabilization and Development since 2022. That aims to, up to 2025, mobilize resources in spite of the crisis. Now, in terms of the mobilization of domestic resources, the government has undertaken a raft of reforms to better improve domestic resource mobilization, above all in a context in which external financing has become much rarer, above all bilateral financing, which has been reduced almost to zero. Therefore, for us, we need to develop resilience strategies so that we can target better solutions and optimize public spending so that we can make the biggest impact for our population. We have fully implemented this plan, and we have, through that, come up with an ambitious plan, the relaunch plan. And when we say relaunch, we are relaunching the way that we do things, but also relaunching the government's ambitions. And this relaunch or recovery plan further targets state sovereignty, focusing on political, public, and activities, and above all, activities to allow Burkina Faso citizens to achieve well-being and prosperity. In this context, we have attempted to analyze our overall financing needs to allow the government to achieve its stated aims. And that figure is around $62 billion. And on that basis, the government has set itself the main mission of mobilizing more than $39 billion from 2026 to 2030, primarily through domestic resources. We also have significant ambitions of being able to mobilize around $18 billion for the overall financing of that plan's implementation. We need to recall that this plan makes up around $21 billion in total priority investment that should accelerate the implementation of the SDGs in Burkina Faso. As I said, in order for that to happen, for that to take shape at the national level, the establishment of the steering committee was key. It is made up of public institutions, but also economic stakeholders, because we have worked primarily on trying to make the SDG the business of the private sector as well, so that we can further capture the contribution of the private sector in the implementation of the SDGs, and to make sure that a large share of the population, including young people and women who have been excluded from financing systems and weren't able to develop their potential, to be included. We've included technical and financial partners in this steering committee through the trio of financial and technical partners, the Troika, and dialogue is continuing in that regard. This is a dialogue that has been built around aligning sources of financing with national priorities. Our aim is to achieve a systematic alignment and, of course, also to achieve the integration, the mainstreaming of financing within the national financing scheme. We have pursued the support of the United Nations system and indeed received that through the UNDP to allow us to produce this INFF and to continue our dialogue with technical and financial partners. We feel that there are a number of important messages that need to be brought to the attention of the international community regarding this tool, which is something that's very important for countries, above all for developing countries, but particularly for countries in a fragile situation such as ours. For us, the integrated national financing framework should be thought of as a tool that supports strategic decision-making, and it is also a support for sovereignty in making the development choices of each country, in this case, Burkina Faso. We also feel that it is an opportunity, given the budgetary and security constraints that we face. It's no longer just a question of us to mobilize more resources, but rather to better allocate, better target, and make better use of the financing and the resources we have available. And this framework allows us to do that. So, in terms of the first key message that I wanted to express, it is that we need to make the INFF a tool for resource allocation at the highest level. And it needs to be at the highest level because, generally speaking, when decisions are taken from a technical standpoint, within that framework, if those decisions are not echoed at the highest levels, primarily with the economics and finance ministries, but also the Prime Minister and the head of state even, we can't necessarily make sure that that technical alignment that we wanted to achieve is necessarily in line with the political ambitions. So for us, it was a question of raising awareness of this framework at the highest levels. The second message we think we need to get across is to move very quickly from strategy to action. Between coming up with a national integrated financing framework and then operationalizing and the mobilization of resources and allowing for a perfect alignment with partners to ensure the proper implementation of actions, it often takes quite a long time. Time that is spent in discussions with partners that have already made choices and governments that already have stated ambitions with a financing gap. So we need to make sure that we quickly establish a sort of roadmap that means that decisions can be made in line with the national priorities. The third key message is to make effective use of official development assistance and other sources of private financing as catalysts. And that is what we are trying to do in Burkina Faso. We feel that increasingly, with the catalytic effect of those partners, which is falling but still remains significant, we will be able to intensify or densify that contribution. If a private funder contributes $1 to a project, the state can then provide an extra $2 to further encourage partners to invest in that sector, because there are often hidden costs, which mean that if you only have partner financing introduced in certain areas, the results are not sufficiently visible and tangible. And then the final key message that I wanted to get across is the need to further strengthen consistency between planning, budget, and results. When countries adopt development strategies, those strategies may be very well drafted, but then the way that they are transformed into the national budget that is then voted on, there may be many misalignments between the plan and the budget. And when we then move on to the stage of analysing and assessing implementation, we often see a gap between the stated aim and then further outcomes that were not initially provided for in the plan, but which ultimately received most of the funding. And that often is explained by the shocks that our countries face, which are often in the form of geopolitical tensions. The countries often did not imagine those shocks would take place, but they have nevertheless disrupted the implementation of those national development and financing strategies. Thank you.